Well, it is really good to see all of you. I'm curious. I want to just kind of go around and hear a little bit, real quickly. I want to know where you're from. Okay, that's what I know. That's what I want to know is where you're from. All right, let's start here. You don't have to say out loud if you don't want to, but if you like to, I'm cool with it. So I was born in Northwest Arkansas. I got out and was walking across the parking lot there when I came out of the cafeteria and walking across, and Timotheus walked up to me and he said, "Are you wearing cowboy boots?" I said, "Yeah, I'm wearing cowboy boots." I thought about not wearing my cowboy boots today because I wore them last time I was here. And well, wait a minute, man, those cowboy boots don't fit in. But I wore them for a reason. For one thing, my wife got them for me for Christmas, and they're my favorite pair of shoes I've ever owned. They're ostrich skin boots. I love them. They're the most comfortable pair of shoes I've ever owned. And I wore them almost every day since Christmas. But it's also what I'm wearing to the wedding. But part of the reason I wore my cowboy boots is because they're part of my story. They're really part of who I am. And that's really what I want to talk to us about today, is our story. And as Timotheus mentioned to you, I'm a licensed professional counselor. And I absolutely love what I do. I posted on my Facebook page yesterday morning before I started. I think I did 37 sessions this week. I had 39 in my calendar. I had 2 that didn't show up. My counted out, I did 37 sessions this week, and most of those are 60-minute sessions. I hear a lot of stories. But I love stories. You may be able to tell that I'm a talker. I love to talk. In my opinion, part of the reason I like to hear where everybody's from is I love to hear people's stories. I love stories. And in my opinion, there's no such thing as a stranger. It's just somebody that has a story that I haven't yet gotten to hear. And so I was thinking one day, sitting in my office as a counselor, and I'm thinking, God, why do I love this job so much? Oh, I didn't tell you that I posted on my Facebook, did I? I posted sitting in my chair. I find sitting in my chair as a professional counselor very humbling, very honoring, and amazingly rewarding. And here's what I mean by that. I'm this little country boy, grew up country boy from Northwest Arkansas, from the Ozark Mountains of Northwest Arkansas. God, who am I that anybody would want to come in and sit down and talk to me? So first of all, I'm extremely humbled that people would even want to come in. And here's the lady of the hour, Miss Kendra, just walked in. Good to see you, Kendra. I'm very humbled that people would want to come in and sit down and talk to me. Secondly, I'm very honored when people open up and start talking to me. And folks, I hear people say things to me like, "Tom, I'm telling you something that I've never told anybody else in my life." And I remember when I went to get my degree to become a professional counselor. I'm 58 years old. I'll be 59 in November. I graduated from Liberty University with my master's professional counseling in 2016. So the counseling part of this is pretty new for me. I've been a pastor since I was 19 years old. And so being in ministry I've done for a long, long time. But being a counselor is a newer thing. And I remember when I was in a class at Liberty, one of the professors stood in front of us. There were probably 150, something like that, students in there. And he stood up there and he said, "Now, folks," he said, "there's a lot of counselors out there." He said, "But there's not very many excellent counselors." He said, "Go be an excellent counselor." And God stirred in my heart in that moment. And I remember thinking, God, I don't even know what an excellent counselor is. God, I don't know if I could ever be one, but I sure want to try. And I remember thinking this, God, if I can't do anything else, please help me be a safe place for people to talk. And that's part of what I want to talk to you about today. But to my liking to hear stories. I was sitting in my office one day, and this gentleman was just telling me these really incredible stories. I thought, man, I love this. And I thought, Lord, why do I love this so much? Well, especially my sons-in-law and my grandkids. I have 7 grandchildren. I just came from dropping my oldest granddaughter off. I own a horse that's boarded about 30, 40 minutes from here. So I just came from being a cowboy a little bit ago to coming in here. And I love my grandkids, but my oldest granddaughter told me the other day, she said, you know, Pat, you're why all of us grandkids are a little peculiar. I said, okay, I guess that's true. I can live with that. But they tell me that people don't like to be talked to that much. My sons-in-law sometimes say, people don't really like to be talked to. I think it depends. They don't like to be talked at. People like to be listened to. People like to be heard. That's the key. But I sat there and I got to thinking, God, why do I enjoy this so much? It hit me. I get to hear stories all the time. And not only do I get to hear stories, people are coming to me. I'm not going and running them down and saying, hey, let me hear your story. They're coming to me. And then on top of that, I get paid to hear people's stories. Right? I mean, it makes it even that much better. But I love it, love it, love it. Oh, my goodness. Some of the stories that I hear. And my cowboy boots are part of my story. I used to tell everybody that I towered at 5'6½". And I got depressed back in September because I had to go to a new doctor and they measured my height. And this young girl looked at me, she said, I said, what was it? I think I asked her, I said, how? I said, what does it show? She said, you're 5'5". I said, no, I'm not. She said, yes. I said, no, I'm 5'6½". She said, no, you're 5'5". I said, I've always been 5'6½". She said, I guess you're shrinking. I said, I don't have room for shrinkage. I can't. Now, I was on the basketball team in high school. I've got a letter jacket. Don't get too excited yet. There's more to the story, I promise you. I got a letter jacket because all you had to do to get a letter jacket was be on a team. And I was on the team, but I was the guy on the basketball team that when the coach was looking for somebody to put in the game, he'd walk right by me. Listen, I didn't go in the game unless we were so far ahead we couldn't lose or so far behind we couldn't catch up. I was one of those guys that was like 5 seconds to go in the game, the coach would put me in because there was no way I could mess it up. My entire high school career, you want to hear what my total points scored in my whole high school? I'm not talking about one game. I'm talking about my whole high school career. 3 points. My whole high school career.
That means you missed the second free throw.
That's exactly what that means, right? That's exactly what that means. I got the first 2, man, it was nothing but net. And the third was nothing but net. And on that fourth, man, it bounced off the rim and went away. I never will forget one time I was in a game, and of course, I think in this one we were so far ahead we couldn't lose him. And there was a jump ball. And I'm not kidding you, this dude that I was going up against he had to be 6'5". And here I was, 5, whatever I was. And I just looked out and thought, there's no need to jump. But here's how the jump ball happened. I was going up to make a shot, and he blocked it, and held his hand on the ball long enough that the ref called a block shot. Okay, not a block shot, a jump ball, I'm sorry. Well, so obviously I didn't get the jump we didn't get the ball on the jump. Got thinking about it later. That guy just saved me a ton of embarrassment. Because what you don't understand was I got a defensive rebound. And I was about to try to shoot it in the opponent's basket. So I am glad that he blocked my shot and saved me an embarrassment. So I was I've asked my girls when I die. I have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter is almost 40. So they're 39, 35, and 30, whatever they are. They're between 39 and 32. I've asked my girls when I die if they'll put a trophy of some sort in my casket. Now, not because I'm proud, but because I never won a trophy. Never won a trophy. I never won a medal. The closest thing that ever came to that was I got a ribbon for a jump rope in PE class when I was in I've been trying to be real with you people this morning, okay? If you want to say, oh, poor thing, that's okay. I get it. Now, listen, I wasn't an athlete. I probably could have been a little better athlete than I tried to be, but I didn't really care. I love horses. Horses was my thing. And my brother and I shared a room. His end of the room was all sports stuff, and my end of the room was all horse stuff. And I still own a horse. I mean, she's a pretty horse. She's a good horse, too. But that's still my thing. I want us to look in the book of Matthew, chapter 7. And there's a woman here that in ways I feel like I identify with her. And some of you may feel like you identify with this woman as well. Now, in this story in the book of Luke, chapter 8, we talk about, Jesus kind of talks about, I don't know, Luke chapter 8, did I say the wrong thing? You're supposed to know what I mean, not what I say. The book of Luke, chapter 8. I thought you guys were looking at me like you were a little confused. You're supposed to know what I mean, not what I say. That's what I told my kids anyway. Luke chapter 8. And in this story, we see some pretty amazing things taking place. And Jesus is he's right in the middle of his ministry and healing. And I want to pick up in verse 40. And by the way, I'm borrowing Timotheus' Bible, so I don't know if I even feel like I should be holding this thing today or not. But Luke chapter 8, verse 40. Now, when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting. They were all waiting for him. I want you to get this picture, all right? So Jesus is coming back. There's a crowd of people. I don't know that I feel like that I've ever been that guy that people were excited to see. You know what I mean? And here comes Jesus, and there's this crowd of people, and they're waiting for him. They're excited about it. Now, it said, and there came a man named Jairus, who was a ruler of the synagogue. And falling at Jesus' feet, he implored him to come to his house. For he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she would die. So here comes Jesus back in, and he's walking back toward this crowd of people. And they're all excited about seeing him. And here comes this man who is a ruler of the synagogue, and he falls at the feet of Jesus. Now, that in and of itself ought not happen, because the rulers of the synagogue did not, by and large, believe in Jesus. But here's one who comes and falls at Jesus' feet because his daughter, 12-year-old daughter, is dying. All right, let's look on that. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. I get this. Here he is. He's this crowd. I mean, it's like a famous athlete or an entertainer or that person that everybody's trying to get close to. As Jesus went, the people pressed around him. I want you to get this. And there was a woman. You notice we don't get this woman's name. We don't know who this woman is. We really don't know that much about her story. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. And though she had spent all her living on the physicians, I just now noticed something. Her illness was the same age as the daughter. I had never noticed that. And I see it's in your Bible, you've got an arrow going back and forth between those two verses. The whole time this girl has been alive, this woman has dealt with her issue. And though she had spent all her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. Nobody could help this woman. She was in desperation. She went to everybody she could, and nobody could help her. In fact, one writer said she only got worse. Verse 44. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. Oh, I love this next part. And Jesus said, who was it that touched me? Nobody in this crowd was really paying this woman much attention. She didn't want to be seen. She didn't want to be heard. She didn't want to be the center of attention. But oh my goodness, she had a need. And one of the writers said, she said, if I could but just touch the hem of his garment, I know I'd be whole. And I love, in verse 45, and Jesus said, who was it that touched me? When all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowd surround you and pressing in on you. In other words, what are you talking about? Who touched me? Everybody's touching you. But Jesus said, someone touched me. For I perceive that power had gone out from me. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him, and how she had been immediately healed. And he said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. Now, if you go on down while he's still speaking, somebody comes and says, don't worry about going to Jairus' house. His daughter, she's died. But I want to focus on this woman who was unseen. I was thinking last night at my house, and I was sitting there, and Pam and I didn't get home till a little bit later in the evening, and I was sitting there, and I was thinking, God, what am I feeling? And here's the reason why, because our denominational convention starts tomorrow in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm supposed to go, but I'm not really wanting to go. And here's part of the reason I struggle when I go, is because I often go there and I feel unseen. But I'm one of those guys that if I go into a place and I don't feel like anybody knows that I'm there, I'm going to make sure they know I'm there. Now, my dad's that way, and I hate that about my dad. My dad is the kind of guy that if he's sitting in a wedding and it's really quiet, and the pastor will say to the husband, you may now kiss your bride, and it's real quiet and it's that real special moment, my dad will yell out, that's long enough! And he say, oh, I just had to say that. He'll laugh. My dad will make sure, whether it's blowing his horn or whatever, he's going to make sure that you know that he's in the crowd. I got to thinking, wow, I do that same thing. Only thing is, I do it by saying amen louder than everybody else. I cover it with righteousness, if you will. Or I also over the years, I developed this, I have a very loud, boisterous laugh. And so if I'm in a crowd of people, and if I'm really in a heartfelt, I'm not faking it. I mean, it's a real laugh, but you will know that I'm in there. I had a guy tell me one time, he said, Tom, if you could bottle up that laugh and sell it, he said, you'd be rich. But I'm going to make sure people know that I'm in there. And I got to thinking last night, God, what am I feeling right now? Because I'm a professional counselor, and I tell folks, I was telling somebody just the other day, and Pam, my wife, I love her, bless her heart, I wish you could meet Pam. On the 1st of August, she and I have been married 41 years. And thank you. She earns a special reward in heaven, let me tell you. But I married the girl when we were 17. Yeah. And she went to her senior year of high school married. Now, she wasn't pregnant. Our first daughter came along 18 months later. Now, here's the reason I wanted to get married when I did. The preacher preached Jesus was coming. And I mean, that's all he preached was Jesus was coming. And I believed it. And I thought, well, this stinks. I waited all this time because I want to have a family. And now Jesus is going to come and mess all that up. I'm going to beat him to the punch. I'm going to marry the girl. I literally told her, now you need to look at Miss Pamela. Pamela's not a camper. I said to her, honey, Pam, we might as well not even buy a house. There's no need to look for a house. Jesus is coming. We'll just live in a tent till he gets here. 41 years in the tent. Can you imagine that girl married me anyway? Where was I headed with that? Why was I telling that story? Oh. Pam's very even keel. Pretty much what you see yesterday, you'll see today and tomorrow. Me, I'm all over the place. My girl saying to me, Dad, you need to get some balance in your life. But listen, I feel big. You know what? When I'm happy, I'm really happy. But when I'm sad, I'm really sad. Some people say it's bipolar. I've diagnosed myself. I'm not bipolar. Now, I do have a little ADD in me, but I'm not bipolar. But no, I feel big. And I don't mean I feel big. I mean, I feel my emotion in a big way. A lot of my life, I felt unseen. One of my earliest memories in life was, for whatever reason, and I love my mom, don't misunderstand me. My parents are both still living. Mom's 79, Dad's 80. We thought Dad was going to die a couple of months ago for real. I went to Arkansas to really what I thought was to say goodbye to him, but he's home now and doing better. So thank the Lord for that. But my earliest memories of life are my mom telling me that when I was born, she didn't want me because I was a boy rather than a girl. Now, I was born in 1962. You know what reveal parties were back in those days? The doctor said, hey, it's a boy or it's a girl. You didn't know until that moment. But my mom said that she didn't want me because I was a boy rather than a girl. I don't know if I sometimes wonder if Mom ever got over that. I sometimes, 58 years old, I sometimes wonder, Mom, did you ever get over me being a boy rather than a girl? My earliest memory of my dad was sitting at the table. I was maybe 2 or 3 years old. Back in those days, you drank a lot, you run around a lot, you'd be gone for days at a time. I remember just sitting up and I remember just looking up at him, sitting on my knees because I was so small. He was here, my mom was here, my brother was over here. I remember looking up at him, probably just wishing that he would pat me on the head or wink at me or smile at me or hug me or whatever. And in a little bit, he caught me. He saw me looking at him. He looked at me with a scowl. He said, what are you looking at? I remember I immediately looked down at my plate. Now, for some of your story, you might think, well, listen, brother, that's nothing. I wish that's all I had to deal with. But listen, your story is your story. And my story is my story. There's a reason I'm saying that. Or you may think, I remember I used to talk to my counselor. I was in counseling for 6 years. I was counseled for 6 years before I became a counselor. And I used to say to my counselor, I said, Dave, I wasn't beaten. He said, Tom, listen. He said, when your mom tells you that she didn't want you because you were a boy, he said, that's traumatic. He said, when your dad looked at you and said, what are you looking at? I said, that's traumatic. Because in my little boy brain, I believed there was something wrong. So I sat there last night and I was just kind of sitting there and thinking about today and what I was going to talk about and maybe what we would do. And I thought, now, what am I feeling? Because I teach myself the process, and I set all these sessions all week long, and I got thinking the other day, why is my feelings always at the forefront? Well, then it hit me. Well, I talk to people about their feelings all week long. And a lot of what I talk to people, these guys that work with me know that I've told them, sometimes after some of my sessions, when I run straight to Pam, and I said, baby doll, I'm so sorry. Because I know that I did, I just heard that guy say he did to his wife, and that kind of, I'm so sorry. I know what. I apologize to her. I've apologized to my kids, my girls, and said, Dad, stop apologizing. We get it. You're sorry. But I was thinking, how do I feel? Do I feel rejected? No, that somehow rejected doesn't seem to quite put it in place. And then it hit me. I feel overlooked. I feel unseen. Now, I don't know if any of the rest of you here have ever felt unseen. Now, you remember when I told you I scored 3 points in my whole basketball career? Yep. Well, in the 8th grade, there was a kid on our team, I'll never forget it, his name was Lon Ball. Blonde hair, taller, all the girls thought he was it. And I mean, the cheerleaders, they were all, everywhere Lon Ball went. And listen, I graduated in 1980, and I didn't graduate with that group because I moved away from there, but I'm part of that group. You know what? They're posting pictures of them back when they were young. You know who they're posting pictures of? Lon Baldwin. All these years later, they're still posting pictures of Lon Baldwin. I've tried to find this is the flesh. I want to see him. Oh, man. I want to see him big, fat, bald, ugly, but I want to see him now that he's old. almost 60 years old. I feel bad saying that. But they would introduce him in the 8th grade in the basketball teams. Or in the basketball games. I promise you, this is how in the 8th grade. And now, number 32. No, I'm sorry, let me back up. And now, starting it forward, number 32. Crowd will already start to clap. And the guy would say, leaping, long, ball one, and he'd run out on the court, and I stood there by the bench. Never a time did the announcer ever say, and now! Number 20, bench one, Tom Jones. Never did it a single time. I've lived my life feeling very unseen. And I identify with this woman to a degree. Now, here's the main part of what I want to tell you today. You have a story. My story started November 1st, 1962, at about 10:10 p.m. And I know that because every year on my birthday, I wake up as a little kid excited about it being my birthday. My mom said, no, not till 10 o'clock tonight. Well, I got to go to bed at 10:30. I got to celebrate my birthday for 20 minutes. And then the next day, or actually my birthday was November 1st. And then all the kids had been out trick-or-treating that night before. They all had bags of candy. They didn't want my suckers that I handed out in class. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's what I came here today looking for. I hear one person say, oh. Now, I'm making more of this. But when I was a kid, this was for real. And I wish I could say when I was a kid, it was for real. Because I just saw him post a picture last night. They're having her eating long bubbles in the picture. And here I am. The dude's 60 years old. Let it go. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's all me. That's me right there. But we all have a story. My story started November 1st, 1962. I was born in northwest Arkansas. A little town called Rabbit, Arkansas. And I don't remember living there. When I was just a baby, my parents moved to Kansas City. And so my earliest memories of life are Kansas City. And we lived in some pretty rough parts of Kansas City. And in fact, what I later learned, I went back, I was up preaching many years later. And I said to somebody, man, I'd really like to go back down on the Titty Street in Kansas City, where they said, oh no, man, you don't want to go back down here. I said, why not? They said, oh, that's really the worst part of Kansas City right now. I said, you probably don't want to go down there. And so, but I remember living there when I was a boy, and those are my earliest memories of life. And then we moved out of there 35 miles northeast of Kansas City to a town called Excelsior Springs, Missouri. And that's where I met Leaping Lon Baldwin. Lon Baldwin probably didn't even know who I am. He probably, you said, what about that Tom? I guarantee he had no clue who I am. But down in northwest Arkansas, my grandparents went to church. My grandfather owned a dairy farm. And I loved helping my grandpa. Dairy cattle and beef cattle and horses. Oh my goodness, I loved it. Now, I grew up wanting to be a farmer in the Ozark Mountains of northwest Arkansas. And where I'm come from, Tyson's poultry industry is the mainstay. That's what I want to do. And I want to raise beef cattle and have horses. And of course, I want to preach too. But then I met Pam, this gorgeous little cheerleader that I thought was so far above me. Well, I think I do. In fact, I know she still is. And but long story short, I wound up giving my heart to Jesus. We moved back to Arkansas in 1977. And that's where I graduated from high school. That's where I met Pam, was in Arkansas, after I moved back there and I graduated from school there. Gave my heart to the Lord and wound up being called to preach. And Pam's father grew up not far from here. And so Pam has a lot of family here. And so when we would begin to come up after she and I got married and we traveled up here to visit her family, that's when God began to burden my heart to come to this area and start churches. And so Pam and I and our 3 girls moved to the Pittsburgh area. We went to Cranberry Township. Most of you may not know where that's at. It's about 20 minutes north of downtown Pittsburgh to start our first church there. Stayed there for 11 years. In 2007, went to Greensburg, where we currently are, and I'm associate pastor there now, and my son-in-law is the pastor. Now that's the better sounding part of the story. The underneath part of the story is this. When I was just a boy, I remember seeing my first pornographic image when I was, oh goodness, I probably be 4 or 5 years old. I didn't know what I was seeing, but I saw it. My dad had a calendar hanging on his wall, and I can still remember, as much as my wife doesn't like to hear me share this, I can still remember that picture. I still remember it. And the main thing I remember about that picture was the look on the woman's face. Because the look on her face said, "You're welcome here." It was a photograph. It was a design. I mean, it was, Lord only knows how much time went into that one picture. But when I was a little boy, that grabbed me. And that look that "You're welcome here." The look on her face didn't say, "I don't want you because you're a boy." The look on her face wasn't, "What are you looking at?" The look on her face was, "You're welcome." Well, I am very, very sorry to say that I learned how to use pornography to try to cover the pain that I felt of being unseen. And where we lived in Missouri, this is when we still lived in Missouri, all of my friends' dads had magazines. We found my dad's magazines. We would find magazines thrown outside the road where we lived because guys would throw them out before they got home or whatever. There was always, back in that day, this was way back before the internet. You had to actually have a magazine or something back in those days. But I'm sorry to say that became my medication. One of the reasons my granddaughter and I went out to see my horse a few minutes ago, or earlier this morning, is because she's been having pain. And my granddaughter rides her and does barrel racing lessons on her, and Bella started bucking not long ago, and I'm not having my granddaughter get hurt on my horse. I'm scared enough about it as it is. But what we found out that Bella was bucking because she was in pain. Well, I thought it was her back. Turns out it looked like it was her ovaries, believe it or not. We treated that, and we went out there today, and today she seemed to be perfectly fine. But we would run our hands down, the last time we were there, we would run our hands down her back. And when it got to a certain point, she would just drop her back. Now, if Blaney would have been on her on the saddle, she would have bucked because the back of the saddle would have been coming down and touching that spot where that pain was. So Bella wasn't trying to hurt Laney. Bella was just in pain, and a horse's brain says, if you're hurt, if your back's hurting, buck and get it off. But we went out there today, we found out what medication to give her. We gave her the medication, and today she seemed perfectly fine. Now, we didn't get on her today because we're still trying to give her some time off. But I just wanted to go today and check on her and see how she was doing, and she seemed to be perfectly fine. But I had a chiropractor come and adjust her, and back before, and he started working his way down her neck just like a chiropractor would, and he started working on her back. And he got to a certain point, and she kind of started shying away. And if you know much about horses, if they lay their ears back, if they pin their ears back, they're about to get aggressive. And so he would touch a certain place, and her ears would go back, and she'd act like she wanted to kick him. But he went back a little further on her back, and I promise, guys, all he did was that. And my horse lost her mind. I had her by the rope, holding her, and she started bucking and jumping, and her ears went back, and the look on her face said, "Dude, if I can, I'm going to kick your head off your shoulders. I'm going to kill you dead right now." She was spinning around trying to kick him. I had to turn her head into the spin so she didn't get turned around. And he got back up on the mountain block, and he was getting ready to adjust that spot in her back, and he looked at me and he said, "I watch yourself." I said, "I got it." Man, he pushed down on that spot like a chiropractor would, and there we went through that whole thing again. But she seemed to do better, and I learned something that day. Bella taught me something very valuable that day. We react to pain points. Alan, come up here a minute, if you would, please. So Alan, I want you to do this for me, okay? I want you to hold your hand up like this. And I want you to take your index finger, and I want you to touch the ends of all your fingers. Tell me what you're feeling.
My fingers touch.
Okay, you don't feel any pain? Well, that's exactly what I'm expecting to feel. What's not so funny about that? All right, you do it. You tell me what you feel. Now, what do you feel? You feel your fingers touching, right? That's exactly. What do you feel? Thank you.
I ain't crazy.
You ain't crazy. Wait a minute, I haven't diagnosed you yet. You might be. All right, so you don't feel. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to go over that door behind Timotheus. All right, go ahead. And I want you to open the one side.
Oh no.
Go ahead, open the one side, whichever side opens. Okay, now I want you to put your fingers flat against the door on this other side. And I want you to pull the door as hard as you can with your fingers, as many times as you can. Why are you stopping? What are you, no, don't really do it. Don't really do it. Most people stop at that point. Most people say, no, I'm not going to. Now, let's say that before you came in here, you had accidentally done that, and your fingers purple and swollen. And if I asked you to do that, then what would you feel? Pain. Then you'd feel pain, and you'd be much less reluctant to do it, right? Okay, thank you. Let's give Alan a hand. What a job, what a job. Here's what I mean by that, and I do that with folks in counseling all the time, and everybody says, no, I'm not doing that. I know Alan went really about to really shut the door on his fingers. But what Bella taught me that day is we all have pain points. Bella had a pain point. You could touch Bella all over the rest of her body, and she wouldn't react like she did in that one spot where she had a pain point. Does this make sense? You guys, does this make sense? Now, what causes our pain points? Our story. Our story. The first thing I want to say to you today about your story is this. Own your story. Own your story. Now, what do I mean by own your story? Let your story be your story. Now, I'm guessing that as I tell you that, some of you are resisting and saying, oh no. Can I tell you guys this? Now that I'm a counselor, I counsel myself sometimes. And I was going home one day, and me and little Miss Pamela had a disagreement about something. And I was going home one day, and I thought to myself, now Tom, this is what you teach other people to do. You need to go do this. And I said, oh, I'm not doing that. I was resisting my own counsel. Thought about asking myself for a refund, but I hated to take it back. I seriously was resisting my own counsel. Some of you, when you heard me say own your story, some of you think, no, Tom, I don't want to do that. I don't want to own my story because my story is too painful. Now, I don't know if this lady here in Luke chapter 8 was trying to own her story that day or not. But I know one thing, all of a sudden her story became her story, right? We don't know how many people knew about her situation. We don't know how many people knew what was going on with her. But we know this much, her story was her story. So, listen, by owning your story, you're going to understand you have pain points. And this is why sometimes when your preacher's preaching, and rather than saying amen, you say, ouch, because it hurt, right? Because something said right there hurt in that moment. It touched something in you. Or maybe those of you that are in a relationship, your spouse or maybe if you're a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever the case might be, it might be parent, it might be a sibling, it might be a coworker. There's just something that really bothers you or taps into something and you don't know why. And so very often we respond to that, right? I'm not going to ask for any volunteers, but I wonder if I went around and asked for volunteers, I wonder how many of you would say when you feel something, the very first thing you do is get angry, just like that. Man, you're ready to fight. First thing, now I'm ready to fight. And here's why. Here's why. Because very often the person, you know the fight, flight, or freeze impulse that we have? Our brain, when we're very little, starts reacting to our story, and we develop our defense mechanism. I call it, rather than fight, flight, or freeze, I call them fighters, runners, or shutter-downers. Some folks automatically fight. Every emotion is anger. Because the first reaction is anger. And here's why. Anything less than that feels scary. Because if I'm angry, listen, I'm not a big dude. I'm not interested in fighting anybody. I don't want to fight. This stuff of everybody fighting right now, this is killing me. I don't like this. I just wish we could all I just wish we'd all love one another like Jesus told us to love one another. Can I get an amen? Yeah. I just wish we could all love one another, regardless of the color of our skin, where we're from, our social status, wherever we are. Let's just act like we love Jesus first, right? And if we love Jesus first, we ought to be loving everybody else, because that's what he told us to do. But anyway, I'm sorry. That's a whole other story. But our very first response, oftentimes, is anger. A lot of times, when our first response is anger, there's been some pretty severe trauma somewhere in our background. It could be abandonment. It could be physical abuse. And the brain says that the only way that I can be safe is I got to get angry. What I started to say a moment ago. Now listen, I'm not going to fight. But if I get angry because you said something to my wife or one of my kids or something like that, then all of a sudden that changes. You know what I mean? I'm still not big enough to fight anybody, but my brain tells me I am because I'm angry. You see what I'm saying? So oftentimes the very first reaction to that pain point is anger. Sometimes it's run. Some people just want to get out of there. They're gone. And their primary reaction typically is fear. And then the third one is to shut down. I'm a shutter down. I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to go anywhere. I used to run pornography, but I'm not going to run. And so what do? Pam will tell you, I shut down. One of my most embarrassing things, is when I lived in Nashville. Pam and I lived in the same house. I was associate pastor at church. I lived in Nashville for a while while I was going to college. And got mad at Pam one time, and I went for 2 weeks without saying a word to the girl. Lived in the same house, slept in the same bed, ate at the same table, sat in the same pew worshiping, drove in the same car. I went for 2 weeks without saying a word to her. And she'll tell you today that that's one of the most harmful things I ever did to her. There's so many things I wish I could do differently. Own your story. What do I mean by own your story? Stop running from your story. No matter how far you run, your story is still your story. You can't run from your story. You can't get away from your story. First thing you want to do is own your story. Second thing you want to do is organize your story. Now, why am I using the word organize? Because it starts with O. It's the best one I can think of. To kind of make this point. If you think of a better word, you feel free to tell me afterwards. I'd like to hear it. Well, what do I mean by organize your story? Well, as a counselor, here's what I help people do: is I help people process. I was talking to a lady who I knew on divorce. She was a client, and this lady was very, very hesitant to say much. And I asked her one day. I said, why are you a little slow? And I didn't use the word slow. I said, you seem to be hesitant to say it. She said, well, Tom, I don't want to sound stupid. And I said, well, what do you mean? Where does that come from? She said, when I was a little girl, my dad used to tell me I was fat and stupid. I said, tell me what that's like for you. She kind of stuttered and stammered and really couldn't get the words out. And I said, hold on. I said, tell me how to saddle a horse. She looked at me like that's crazy. She said, Tom, because she knew I was a horse. She said, you know how to saddle a horse. I said, I know I do, but tell me how to saddle a horse. Boom, right down the line. Boom, 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 boom. You do this, and you stop. Absolutely. What was that like for you when your dad called you fat and stupid? She went right back to stuttering and stammering. She couldn't get the words out. I said, hold on. Tell me how to saddle a horse. She kind of rolled her eyes. I said, now tell me again, what was it like for you when your dad called you fat and stupid? Same thing, went right back to stutter and stammer. She couldn't get the words out. I said, now I had you do that for a reason. Because most of our pain, we've never given it a narrative. And that's why we don't know how to say how we feel about it. But saddling a horse, she had done many times. She did it without even thinking. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that's why when I ask people about, that's like even a moment ago, even last night, and And I've been a pastor since I was 19. I'm a professional counselor. I've got a license hanging on my office wall from the state of Pennsylvania that says they believe I know what I'm talking about. But just last night, I was sitting in my living room trying to figure out what I feel. And it took me a little while because I've never given it a narrative. And you know why? Because when I felt this, I ran to pornography rather than trying to figure out what I felt. Now, what we do, I had Alan up here a minute ago, we have these pain points. I thought about that as like my horse's vertebrae. What we do then is I have people take this hand and cup it and cover it over these like these pain points. And we use this to cover this so we don't feel the pain. So for some of you, this is anger. For some of you, this is running away. And there may be some of you sitting here today that this is pornography. You're using pornography to do this. For some, it's drugs. For some, it's illicit relationships. For some, it may be food. For some, it may be spending money. This list could go on and on and on. But it's what we're doing here to do this, to keep from feeling this. Did I just strike a nerve right there when I talked about spending money? Okay. So by organizing your story, here's what I mean. You give your story a narrative. And here's what I ask people to do. I had a guy in my office the other day, and he was telling me about being very wounded as a little boy. And I said, well, tell me what that was like. And he kind of tried to put it in words, and he couldn't. I said, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. And we're going to pretend it's somebody knocking at the door. And I want you to reach behind you, and I want you to open the door. And we're going to pretend there's somebody there. We're going to pretend that he's 70 years old, and I said, we're going to pretend that it's 7-year-old you. And he did this. Oh, no, don't make me do that. Please don't make me do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. I'm not exaggerating. Oh, no, please don't make me do that. I said, okay, well, tell me why. He said, I can't. He said, I don't know how to help him. I don't know how to help him. So I gave him an assignment. I said, so I want you to write 2 letters. The first letter I want you to write is from 7-year-old you to 70-year-old you, telling 70-year-old you what it's like to be 7-year-old you. He said, well, what if I can do that? Okay, well, let's just try. Let's see what we can do. He hadn't done it yet. We haven't gotten to that part yet. Then I said, after you write that story, I want you to read it aloud to yourself. Because there's something about when I've had people say to me in sessions, wow, saying that out loud sounds different somehow. Like a lot of times when somebody says that, I say, what's that like for you to say that out loud? Well, I don't know, it feels kind of strange. Or sometimes they'll say, wow, it feels really free. It feels really relieving. I said, okay, after you read that letter aloud, then I want you to write a letter from 70-year-old you back to 7-year-old you, comforting 7-year-old you. The next session, this guy told me, he said, Tom, he said, my wife and I were worshiping the other day. He said, we sang that song, In My Father's House. There's a place for me, a place for you. Are you guys familiar with that song, In My Father's House? And he said, something hit me. He said, when we sang those words, he said, I just had a picture of a little boy hiding in the cupboard with the door closed and his head down like this. I said, wow. I said, who was that little boy? I said, what's that little boy in there? I said, I don't know. So we're going to work through and try to figure out why that little boy feels so scared and why that little boy's under there. But the man's 70 years old, and he's never given a story to why that little boy is hiding under there. A few months ago, I was in my living room one morning, sitting in my recliner, doing my morning devotions. And when I read, and Pam was still in bed, I was glad she was, because I was in her ball like a baby. She thought I'd lost my mind. And I was in her praying, and I felt like God was saying to me, Tom, come to me. Come to God. My dad taught me you don't look at your dad. Remember I told you when my dad said, what are you looking at? I looked at him. Folks, I'm 58 years old. Now, I could stand in front of you guys and pray, and it wouldn't bother me a bit. But when it's just me and God, I still struggle with that. I still struggle to believe that just when it's just me and him, that he wants me to look at him. And my dad didn't mean to do that to me that day. My dad doesn't even remember that moment. I remember my mom said to him, well, you've been gone so long, he's probably trying to figure out who you are, and they started fighting. He doesn't remember that. I brought it up to him one time. He said, oh, son, I don't remember that. I said, no, you don't, Dad, I do. I guess I'll take that to my grave. But that morning I was sitting there, and God said, Tom, come to me. I said, you don't do that. God said, I'm not that kind of father. And I looked, and I saw that little boy still sitting in a chair. It was one of those old metal tables. Some of you might be old enough to remember those. Remember those metal chairs had the metal tables? Remember those like your grandparents maybe used to have way back in the day? Remember like that? And when I sat there that day with my eyes closed, I looked and I could see that little boy still sitting there. And it hit me. That little boy had been sitting there for probably 55, 56 years. And in that moment, that little boy looked at me, and I knew it was me. He looked at me and he said, I don't know what it did to make Dad mad. And for the first time in my life that I'd ever said this, I said, buddy, I love you. And when I said I love you to myself, I just started crying even that much harder. Pamela probably called 911, had me taken in. I mean, I was losing. And I said to that little boy, I said, buddy, you didn't do anything wrong. Dad was just angry. We don't know why Dad was angry. We may never know why Dad was angry. Dad was just angry. You just go play. I can see that little boy get down out of that chair. And then it just kind of like went off into a fog. I don't know. After that, I don't really see anything. But that little boy, after all these years, is no longer in the chair. See what I mean by organize your story? Now, that story was in me for a lot of years. That's what I mean by organize your story. Now, sometimes you need some professional help. Seriously, please understand this. To seek professional counseling does not mean you're weak. In fact, I tell folks all the time that I think the strongest thing they can do is sit down and talk to me or somebody like me. Doesn't have to be me. It can be somebody like me. Somebody that's trained, because sometimes you need some help to go through that. I don't know, am I talking to anybody here today? Is this story hitting anybody? And part of the reason I'm telling you guys this is Kaleo is because my understanding is you folks are like you guys are like the youth leaders in that of some of the, they're like whatever, the mentors or whatever of some of these kids that are here at camp, right? And you're dealing with kids that are dealing with this at home. You're dealing with some kids that experienced exactly what you experienced. Oh, some of the stories I can tell you. My goodness. And the ones that stick with me the most. I tell people if I'm out cutting my grass and I'm remembering a story that that was shared with me in a session, it's usually from a sex abuse case. Some of those are. Oh. If you were sexually abused, male, female, whatever, I'm imploring you to seek help. Because, oh my goodness, that does things to the psyche. Because that little brain of that child just doesn't know how to process that. And most everybody believes they did something wrong. And I want you to know if you were sexually abused, you didn't do anything to cause it. Okay, I gotta go on, I'm sorry. I didn't think I'd be here this long. I got a wedding to go to a little bit. The last thing I want to say to you is optimize your story. Own your story. Organize your story. Optimize your story. I wonder if that little lady that showed up in the crowd that day had any idea that some 2,000 years later, way back in the woods outside of Rector, PA, be a little short white dude. Scored 3 points in his whole basketball career. knows how to call the hogs up. Be standing there telling her story. And that her story could impact other people's story. One of the most powerful things you can do with your story is help other people know they're not alone. Because I promise you, there's kids around us right now that feel like nobody sees them. Now, very thankful for what Timothy said about me a moment ago. I love being a counselor. But I'll tell you this, that the thing that people tell me seems to help them the most is that I listen to. I don't try to fix anybody. My sister-in-law called me the other day, telling me about a scenario that she was in. She said this girl was talking to her, and she said, I'd say, whoa, that's a lie of the devil right there. No, that's not true. I told her, I said, Steph, the first thing you have to do is stop saying, whoa. Stop saying that. Stop telling her it's a lie of the devil. It's a lie of the devil, but she can't hear it right now. For one thing, the woman she's talking to is not a Christian. She's not a believer. I said, whoa. I said, no. I said, no. I said, stop saying whoa. I said, start saying, what's that like for you? Listen, when these kids want to talk to you, before you try to give them the truth, first of all, hear them. Because if they know you're hearing them, they'll be much more receptive to the truth. You see what I'm saying? There's an old saying that says they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And folks, that's absolutely true. Now, there's more to my testimony, but I don't have time to go into it right now because I got in this, and I just felt like this is what the Lord wants to talk about today. I struggled with pornography throughout the years until it came to the point that my wife said, Tom, you either get help or we're done. And I did, at that point I did. And that's when I got into counseling. I was being counseled for 6 years, and today I'm a certified sex addiction therapist because I know what a struggle this is for people. And so I'm here to tell you that God can deliver you. But it's a battle. My goodness, it's a battle. And not just pornography, but whatever it is that you're using to cover this. Now, see, here's the thing. Feeling stinks. We don't like to feel. But there's no saying that goes, you got to feel before you can heal. Because when you feel it, you can put a narrative to it. And then guess what you can do? You can be like this woman. You say, I just got to get to Jesus. I just got to get to Jesus. Right? And I will tell people all the time that God has given me a position where I have a front row, center stage seat to watch God do amazing things. And I tell everybody that I counsel, I'll say, look, listen, please understand this. I don't believe there's a counselor alive that can bring healing. Only God can bring healing. And for the people that let me pray at the beginning and the ending of each, I call them conversations rather than sessions, and almost all the people that I work with welcome me praying with them. And I'll say, God, we know that we need you. I'll say, Lord, do the healing that only you can do. And oftentimes I'll pray on my way to the office, Lord, help me sit well today. What I mean by that is, God, help me hear well. Lord, help me know when to talk and when to be quiet. Here's what I mean by optimize your story. Just like this lady went to Jesus, her story became a story of. Now, I don't know if you're going to have the exact same ending to your story as this lady had. Because our story is still being written, right? We don't know what the end is. In fact, when we step across into glory, it's not the end, it's just the beginning of a whole new, right? All right.